Hey guys, good afternoon. Here is a little video on how to annotate the PBA practice that we're going to do. So when you come into Canvas, you're going to see that we have one article right here that we're going to start annotating. And before we get into the assignment, the PBA is kind of like our final grade for the year. So it's not going to be until after spring break, but it is something that we want to start practicing. And it's going to incorporate all the skills that we've kind of been learning so far with how to read and analyze and annotate. And then we're going to put together the ideas of where you're going to take a stance and create a claim and a counterclaim and a rebuttal and use evidence. Okay. So the thing I want to say about this is that this is a very large grade. All the pieces that we're going to be doing this week are going to go in the proficiency category of your grade. That is 40% of your entire grade. So these grades can determine whether you pass or fail the class. Okay, so please keep that in mind. This is very important for you to do because it is such a large grade. The good news is I'm going to walk you through how to do this first article. Okay, so when you click on here, it's going to ask you to make a copy. So you're going to click on make a copy, and it's going to pull up this page. Now, before we even start reading our articles, your PBA is going to be you creating a whole essay. Now, for this year, we're not going to make the essay part, but we are going to do all the pieces to it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to look at all of the information we can, because in a real PBA situation, you are not allowed to use any notes or anything like that. And so we want to really annotate and get as much information down on paper as we can. So if we look at our title here, it says Women in Combat Positions in the United States Military Articles. So right away, I want to highlight a couple things. Okay, so we're going to note that we're only talking about combat positions. So we're not talking about just women in the military or not in the military. We're talking about should the women in the military already be allowed to go into combat. And we're only looking at our country right now. So we're looking at the United States. So those are two pieces that we really want to remember. And then it gives you a little bit of background here. So it says in December 2015, Defense Secretary Ash Carter announced that women in the U.S. military could serve in combat positions. So it is already something that they are doing. So I'm going to highlight that. And I'm going to make myself a note. I'm going to say women have been in combat for several years because this started in 2015. The news was received with mixed emotions. While some felt it was a positive move, others felt the decision would negatively affect the U.S. military. Okay, so there's a little bit of background information here. It was kind of mixed, so I'm going to highlight that as well. And I'm going to make a little comment, both positive and negative sides. And then it goes into your actual essay prompt. Okay, so it says write an argumentative essay. So this means that we are going to have our claim, our counterclaim, and rebuttal ideas. And your prompt here is, should women serve in combat positions in the United States military? So I'm going to highlight my prompt in a different color. So that's the question we are trying to answer. Should women serve in combat positions? And then this is all the stuff about your essay here. So we have two articles that we're going to read. And then you have to take a position. So I'm going to highlight this for you. You have to analyze both the claims and the counterclaims. So you're going to address both sides of the argument. You have to have text-based evidence, and you have to have citations. So a lot of that is our skills that we've already done. Okay, so this is kind of just your first stop when we go into something like this. We want to know about our topic, we want to know what our prompt is, and we want to know what we're going to do with this information. Okay, then what we want to do is we want to scroll down and start annotating. So you have directions up here at the top. Read and annotate the following articles so you can write an argumentative essay on whether or not women should be allowed to hold combat positions in the United States military. Okay, and then on the sides here you have columns for notes that you can type in, and I'm going to show you kind of a trick. So the first thing that we want to do is take a look at some text features. Okay, when we annotate, the first thing we want to do is just look and see, are there pictures, are there titles, are there subtitles? So I'm going to use the color blue to look at, here's our title and our author. So here's my title, and then my author's last name is also right here. So I'm going to highlight these two things just so that I know where to get my citation information. Okay, because if I'm writing my paragraph, I'm going to use this last name and this title to cite anything I find in this article. Okay, then I'm going to go through and I'm going to look. Oh, we've got a couple of headers. So I'm going to highlight those so that they can just pop out at me. And this is without having read anything. Okay, I'm not actually reading the article yet. I'm just going through and looking to see what kind of subtitles we have and if we have any pictures. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to make little chunks. So up here, this is a little bit harder to do online, but what I would want to do is I would want to go through and put, like this is chunk number 1. And I'm going to highlight it so that it stands out to me. But I'm going to stop after every chunk that I do, just so that I can get an idea of how much information I'm reading. Okay, so I'm going to chunk it by paragraph, and that is something that is going to help slow me down. So at the end of every paragraph, I'm going to remember that where I have the highlighted number, I'm going to stop. So we're just going to go through real quick and do this for each paragraph. And I know it takes time, but I promise you it's going to help you as you go through and do your information for the writing and the essay and kind of creating your organization. So I'm going to do it for this first set right here. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to say my notes on this side, I'm going to say yes and make a key and say anything that I highlight in purple is going to be for yes, women should be in combat. And then I'm going to say, oops, I'm going to change my color and I'm going to use blue, dark blue. Okay, and I'm going to say no, women should not be in combat. Let me get rid of that weird highlighting. Oh, let's not use that blue. That's not a good color. Let's use green. Okay, so this purple color is yes for combat, and this green color is no for combat. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to highlight any kind of evidence or claim that's yes or no. And so let's just go ahead and start with this first paragraph. And off to the side in these notes on either side, I'm going to do specific things. So on this side with my notes, I'm going to ask questions. And with this side, I'm going to write commentary. Okay, so if I start with this first paragraph, The decision to integrate women fully into the military was met with a range of controversy and emotions. For women and many men in the military, it was a quietly celebrated milestone. For women outside the military, it was celebrated as a step towards true equality. For others, it was viewed as an unwise decision that would destroy the combat effectiveness of the military and have negative consequences for the U.S. national security. So first I'm going to do is I'm going to ask some questions, or I'm going to clarify some things. So I'm going to ask, why are there so many different opinions? Not sure why that's highlighted. Okay, and then I'm going to come through and I'm going to say, is there anything in here that I should highlight in this purple color for yes? So if I look, I'm saying that it was a step towards equality. So I'm going to highlight that in the purple. But then I have something that is a little bit negative. So some people think it's going to destroy combat effectiveness and have negative consequences. So I'm going to mark that yellow because that is evidence for no, they should not be in combat. Then I'm going to take this idea here. Do I have anything to say yet? I don't think that I do. I'm going to read the second paragraph first before I write some commentary. So the second paragraph, the American public has not objected to women being killed or wounded any more than it has to men. Personal hygiene and privacy has not been problematic. Women can keep pace on long-range patrols, and the performance of men overall does not lessen when fighting alongside women. Additionally, data from the 2011 class at the West Point reveals over 52% of female cadets passed the Army physical fitness test using the male standards. In short, a percentage of women are just as physically capable as men. Moreover, new research suggests women can increase the combat capabilities of the military from the squad to the joint staff without damaging group cohesion. A group is not just linked by common traits such as race, ethnicity, or gender, but is based on collective goals and objectives. Recent research also shows military units are not hurt by the addition of women. So we have a lot of stuff in this second paragraph that I want to take a minute and go through. First, I want to make a couple of notes down here. So I'm going to move my cursor down to the second paragraph, and I'm going to make a note that says this is talking about women using the same test as men. Okay, that's kind of key. And then I'm going to, oops, I skipped a word. Then I'm going to go through and I'm going to look, are there words that I don't understand? And I'm going to underline those. So I'm going to underline West Point because West Point, I know it's a school, but I don't really know what it is. So then I'm going to come over here, and the good news about this is we can just do a Google search for definitions. So it's a military academy. So here I'm going to define West Point is a military academy. Okay. There's a couple other words here that were a little bit iffy, like cohesion. So I'm going to underline that, and I'm going to come back to my Google search. I'm going to define cohesion. A united whole or sticking together. So then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to define that. Okay, and then let's do ethnicity as well. So ethnicity is the state of belonging to a social group that has cultural traditions or national traditions. So then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say ethnicity is your heritage or your culture. Okay. And then there's a couple of things in here that I might want to highlight. So let's see, was there anything that was positive in this paragraph that we want to highlight? I think the idea that women can keep pace is a good positive thing to highlight for yes. And then also this statistic right here, 52% of female cadets passed using the male standards. So these are pretty strong pieces of evidence that say, yes, women should be in combat. Okay. It also says women can increase combat capabilities of the military in their squad. So I'm going to highlight that for a yes too. Doesn't really look like there's anything terribly negative in this paragraph, so I'm not going to label anything yellow. But now that I've done a couple paragraphs, I'm going to come over here and write a little bit of commentary. Okay, so I'm going to say, studies show women are just as physically able to do the same work as men. And then I'm going to say this strengthens military. Women are not proven as a distraction. Okay, so I'm going to write a little bit of that commentary, what I'm thinking or what I'm noticing over here in this side. Then I'm going to move into my next chunk. Okay, so this has another header right here, collective intelligence. So I'm going to actually underline this and look at what that means. So people acting as a group. So I'm going to come over here So what that means is collective intelligence, people are working together. Okay, so this paragraph says Carnegie Mellon and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, have partnered to examine collective intelligence to understand how to improve team performance. The research shows groups are collectively more intelligent than individuals on a range of simple to complex tasks. Additionally, the research found that a group's collective intelligence tends to increase as the percentage of women in the group increases. Researchers believe that this may be due to a trait they call social sensitivity, which reflects how well a person can read the emotions of other people. The ability to recognize emotional changes leads to more collaborative patterns of group behavior. Women tend to score higher than men on these areas. So I'm going to just take this information. Now, this is a pretty positive paragraph. This is really, really going for yes, women should be in the military, and that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my definitions because I don't remember what Carnegie Mellon is. So I'm going to underline that, and then I'm going to come over here and say Carnegie Mellon. Oh, it's a university. So if I click on it, it's a university in Pennsylvania, and if I look at my little blurb here, it's a research university. So they're pretty good pretty good source. So it's a research university. And the same thing with MIT. So I'm actually going to add that in here. MIT is also a research university. It's highly recommended for people who are looking into finding information. So I'm going to underline that as well. Okay, so here we have this little blurb about people are better, they think better together. So think about that. If you're having to do something on your own, you might be okay doing it, but research shows collective intelligence increases your success. So that's like when teachers put you in group work. Sometimes you find it easier to do the work. That's because research shows that people tend to work better together. Okay, so communication is better with groups. And then why do we think this is something that is happening? Women score higher in an area, particularly emotional changes. So women score better on these emotional changes, and this helps the group to work better. Why do we think that is? So I'm going to ask a question over here and take off my underline. Why does having women in groups improve performance? And then I'm going to kind of think out loud for a minute, and I'm going to say women tend to be, this is not the end all be all. There are a lot of men who are good at emotions. There are a lot of women who are not, but they're just saying in general, women tend to focus on emotions, which can help improve communications. And since we're talking about military communication in dangerous situations is important. Okay, so let me delete a couple of those spaces so it stays up here. Dangerous situations. So this is why this is important. If we don't have communication in the military, a job could go bad. It could lead to people dying. So this is why we're looking at this idea that yes, women could be potentially helpful. Okay, so let's move on to our next paragraph that kind of splits the page here. The study also reveals groups whose conversation is dominated by a single person or a small number of people in the group are collectively less intelligent than groups where communication is evenly shared. So again here, we have some information here that communication is important, okay? Researchers found groups with more women tended to have more even communications distribution than men. If this research is applied to the military, it suggests adding women can strengthen every organization. This intelligence need not come at the expense of physical strength, but rather can complement it. So there's a couple things that I want to highlight in here. Okay, so the groups with more women have more even communications, and that's a positive. So I'm going to highlight that for purple because that is a good positive for why women should be in the military. Okay, again, this idea of communications. And again, we have this idea of important. Communication is important in dangerous situation, but we also have this idea that women's strengths complement men's strengths. So we're not necessarily looking at women to need physical strength, but they can help with social situations. If there's like a military issue where there's hostages or something like that, perhaps that emotional and communication strength could be helpful. Then I'm going to go down here to number 5, or paragraph number 5, and I'm going to keep going. A number of reports provide clear links between organizational success and the number of women in the most successful organization. For instance, the Catalyst Information Center tracks studies that demonstrate the link between diversity and successful businesses. Collectively, these studies reveal companies with the most women board directors, especially those with 3 or more women board directors, had better financial performance than those with the least women board directors. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make myself a little comment. Okay, and it basically is saying that women can organize well in businesses. Okay, and the military is a type of business, so this is something that we want to take into consideration. So continuing on, we're right here. Lifting the combat exclusion policy now allows women increased opportunities to compete for high-level positions. As studies show, the results should be improved quality and scope of decision-making at the highest levels. So I'm going to highlight this for yes. This article is very heavy in the yes. So, oops, I didn't want to do that one. I want to highlight where it says women increased opportunities to compete for high-level positions. And then the results are improved quality and scope. So let's look at scope, because this is kind of an interesting word. So it's looking at the quality, so that how much they do well, but scope is also looking at let's see here. Here we go. Oh, let me put in my define scope. That would help. Okay, so scope means the extent of which something is relevant. Okay, so we're going to say, the amount something is necessary or important. So what we're saying here is that women in business positions give higher quality and they have more influence with decision making. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a comment. How can this benefit the military? So military can benefit from different points of view. And new backgrounds if women are allowed all positions. So it can really help kind of expand what the military knows, what they see, what they do when they have people from all sorts of backgrounds. Okay, so let's take a look at paragraphs 6 and 7 now. It says women already serve in close combat specialties in the following countries: Australia, Canada, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Israel, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, Romania, Spain, and Sweden. Perhaps best known for its use of women in the military is the Israel Defense Force, where women make up 34% of the force and work along with their male peers. Although the IDF restricts the service of women to 88% of available positions, women do serve in close combat positions. In a 2005 study of female combatants, Israeli commanders reported women exhibiting superior skills in discipline and motivation, maintaining alertness, shooting, managing tasks and organization, and displaying knowledge and professionalism in weapons use. Less well known is the Norwegian military, which has employed women in all ground combat specialties since the early 1980s. The Norwegians report women increase operational effectiveness, and there is no evidence that unit cohesion is affected. So this is very interesting. So there's a couple things that I'm going to write down over here on the side with my notes. And that is going to be that women are already doing this. So why is America behind? We're supposed to have one of the best armies, military forces, but why have we not included women? So that's a question I'm going to ask. And then I'm going to make a couple little comments like Israel is ahead of times. And I'm going to do this fun little thing. Hashtag girl power. Because that's essentially what this is talking about. They are using women to the advantage of the military, okay? So I'm going to highlight a couple things. First and foremost, women already serve in other countries, so that's definitely a positive. Okay, so there's a couple things in here. There's another piece where the Israeli commanders have some positive things to say about having women in the military, so I'm going to mark that as positive. And then down here, when we talk about the Norwegians, it says that they think women increase effectiveness. Okay, a lot of people argue that women will decrease because it's distracting, but it's apparently not. So on the side here, I'm going to mention that other countries have female combat positions. So it doesn't actually make the military weak. Because Israel's force is one of the strongest. Okay, and then I'm going to put a little note down here that mixed gender units are proven to be functional as single gender units. Okay, so this is just kind of proving that it does actually help. And then I'm going to make a little comment over here. I just thought about this. Okay, Norway allows all positions, but Israel only allows 88%, so most positions. Okay, so that's quite interesting. Obviously, this article again is pretty pro women in military, and that's good. So let's move on to our next piece. This is another little chunk. So we have physical requirements. So up here, we talked about cognitive intelligence. So I'm going to make a note. We're going to talk about thinking. And then up down here, we have like the fighting and the physical. So the author has kind of broken this up. Okay, so if we're looking at our physical requirements, I haven't chunked this section, so I'm going to go through and I'm going to continue my numbers. So this is actually paragraph 8 that I'm going to put here. And we have paragraph 9. Paragraph 10. computer's being really slow. I'm sorry, guys. And then finally, we have paragraph 11. So not a super long article. Let's go ahead and chunk that there so we know when we want to take a break and kind of talk about things. All right, so back up to here. We are looking at our physical requirements. So this is kind of interesting. So let's start by looking at paragraph 8. A long-standing concern has been whether women possess the physical strength necessary to rescue male soldiers who are wounded, or whether they can perform tasks requiring physical strength. However, the issue is not really that all women need to be as strong as men. Rather, it is about letting those women serve who can meet the physical standards. In fact, many women can perform all the tasks required of infantry soldiers, and many women have demonstrated physical prowess in the heat of battle. Just a few examples include the following. Specialist Monica Brown, a combat medic, received the Silver Star in Afghanistan for bravery under fire when she rescued wounded male soldiers in the cavalry regiment to which she was assigned. Major Kelly McCoy, an engineer platoon leader, earned the Bronze Star with valor when she ran through enemy fire not once, but twice to rescue wounded soldiers in Iraq. And Staff Sergeant Jessica Packard, U.S. Air Force, scored the fastest course time of both sexes in the 2009 Firefighter Combat Challenge, which included carrying a 175-pound victim while wearing full bunker gear. Okay, so there's a lot of information in just this one little chunk, number 8. But I'm going to make a few notes. I don't really think there was a whole lot that we should clarify as far as vocabulary. It's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to start thinking like, we have these physical concerns brought up. So this is valid. But we do want to say that it may not necessarily matter. So I'm actually going to highlight this part right here, where we're talking about, are women strong enough? And I'm going to highlight that in our yellow. Okay, and if we go all the way back up to, in the green, I'm going to highlight it in green. I've been doing the wrong color. Oh my gosh. Guys, I'm sorry. This should be green. Been hitting the wrong color. So I'm going to make that green because this is a very negative piece for why women should not be in military combat positions. But we have a lot of really good, strong pieces. So I'm just going to highlight the names of the women here because all of this can serve as evidence for why they should be allowed. So while we have this idea that yes, there are some physical concerns, there's a lot of evidence saying that most women should be able to be in the military, in the combat part anyway. Okay, so I'm going to actually make a little like exclamation points and make these really big because I feel like this right here is a really important piece to come back to, especially when I'm wanting to argue that yes, women should be in combat positions because we have proven with real women that they have success. Okay. But what I want to know is, why don't we hear about them? So one of the things I'm going to write down is that women's recognition isn't necessarily as prevalent as when men do things. So this could be because of gender bias. Maybe we've got a little bit of, oh, they're a girl, so we don't care. Or maybe it's because the women don't brag. They don't discuss it. Maybe when the men come home, they're like, guess what I did? I don't know. But I'm just going to write down this idea that we're not hearing about this. I have never heard of these people. But, you know, if I think about it, there's probably some men that I could list off for doing special services. So I think that that's a really key point that we want to look at, where, you know, everybody has this, in Arizona specifically, the Pat Tillman run, you know, because he was from here and he did a lot of good things when he was in the military and people know him, but we don't necessarily hear about these women. So I think this is a good thing that we want to write down. Okay, so we're going to move on to our last couple paragraphs. We're almost done. So paragraph 9. Conventional combat arms specialties have been closed to female soldiers. Therefore, evidence of their ability to perform physically in combat units in the United States is non-existent. However, predictive evidence can be gained by examining women's performance in support units with combat missions. For example, women in military police units routinely perform some of the same functions as soldiers in combat units, including route security, cordon and search missions, and raids. Okay, so there's a lot of words in here that I don't know, so I want to start with that. Combat arms specialties, if I think about this, I'm just going to underline it. I'm not going to necessarily go to the dictionary definition because I don't think it's going to have one, but I'm just going to talk through, I think combat arms specialty means like, sorry, I gotta spell this right. Combat arms specialties would be like weapons specialization. And women don't generally do that, so we don't have any kind of data. So I'm actually going to highlight this green because that's kind of a negative. We have no data on how women deal with the weapon specialties like we do with the men. But that's okay, because then the very next sentence it says we have this idea of predictive evidence. So I'm going to underline this, and I'm just going to hypothesize again. Predictive evidence, well, if we're predicting something, we're using evidence from other areas to show how something is going to do later. We're predicting because we got evidence from over here. So, so this is how we're going to show how people are going to do it in the future. So if we're looking at this, they're examining women's performance in other areas, and they're seeing that they're doing well, so why wouldn't they do well in combat specialization too? Okay, in the arms, in the weapons. So I think that this part here is a very interesting and strong piece of evidence for why women should be allowed combat. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to think about a little bit of commentary. So I'm going to say, even though we don't have specific evidence, we know women are valuable in other military areas. So we know that those strengths can be applied in other places. And then I'm not really concerned about knowing exactly what these are, except that there are other things. Route security is where, you know, they're looking at how you're going to get from one place to another, how secure it is. Search missions, raids, I don't need to define those necessarily. I just know that there are other parts of the military unit that women have been involved in. Okay. Paragraph 10. Additionally, women complete the Army's Sapper Leader course, a physically demanding 28-day course that includes infantry training missions. The course requires successful completion of combat patrolling, urban breaching, mountaineering, water operations, and reconnaissance. Sorry, I got distracted by that. Reconnaissance, raid, and ambush techniques. Students must complete distance runs of 3 to 7 miles at a 7-minute pace and a 12-mile, 35-pound ruck march in under 3 hours. Before every meal, students must do 6 chin-ups and climb a 12-foot horizontal ladder and a 30-foot rope. By the end, sapper leaders, male and female, are hardened combat engineers prepared to fight on today's modern battlefield. Okay, first of all, I'm just going to react to this by saying these are very harsh standards. And they are across genders. So it doesn't matter if you're a male or a female, you're going to do the same thing. And these are harsh to me. I don't think I could do any of that. Like 7 miles in under 7 minutes, that's crazy. So these are very harsh standards, and I'm wondering, how do people of any gender keep that time? Okay, so this has a lot of interesting information, but nothing is super pro or con. It's just information until we get to the end here where it says sapper leaders turn into these people who can lead in the battlefield. Okay, there was one piece that I wanted to go. Urban breaching is where they go into the city. So urban would be the cityscape. So urban breaching would be like infiltrating a city. So I'm going to highlight that and underline it as vocabulary. So they're being trained to do all sorts of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to add a little bit of commentary. And it shows, here's the thing, when we think about the sapper leaders, male and female, being able to do all these things, this proves, I don't know why my keyboard is lagging. This proves that women are not a liability if they can pass the test. If they can't pass the test, just like the men who can't pass the test, they don't become these leaders. So this test here proves that they're not a liability if they can pass it. So let's go ahead and finish up our paragraph. Paragraph 11, women provide a vital contribution to critical and creative thinking and decision-making in our national security apparatus. This capability is unnecessarily missing in many military units where currently there are no women. If the U.S. military wants to optimize its team's collective intelligence and make better executive-level decisions, we must tap into the half of the population that is underutilized. As recent studies reveal, and as our foreign partners have demonstrated, our units and U.S. national security overall will benefit by adding women to combat branches. So there's a couple things that I want to highlight here. Definitely we have a very clear claim that women should be part of the military, which is vital to the creative thinking and decision making. So I'm going to highlight that in purple. And I'm going to highlight their last sentence here, where we're going to benefit by adding women to combat branches. Okay. And then I'm going to come over here and finalize some commentary that I'm thinking of, where we want more creativity. It's good. More creativity is good. It will help our military branch out and compete on a global level. If we're not ready to compete with other nations' militaries, we're not going to be as good. So this puts us up at a global level. Okay, so that looks like a lot of annotations that we've done, and it is. So it is kind of an intensive process, but let me change this to green. I apologize for that. It will help you when you go to do your writing, okay? So our next step, after we do the annotations, you'll see right here, it says continue to the next page for the T-chart. What we're gonna do is we're gonna look at our pros and our cons, which should be fairly easy because we've color-coded them. And this is why I got confused, because half of my article is in the wrong color. There we go, fix that. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna create a T-chart, yes on one side for our purple and no on the other side with our green. And we're just going to kind of list ideas of why they should or should not based on just what we've learned in the article. So for yes, we have a ton of yes, tons and tons of yes. But one of the first things I'm going to do is kind of think, what was the biggest reason? And I think that was because it will strengthen the military with different skills. So we're talking those social and emotional and communication skills. That came up a lot in the article. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write that down, and then I'm going to go back to the article and I'm going to try and find a quote. So it should be something that I've highlighted already. So I'm going to take a look at my purple highlighting, and I'm looking for where we're talking about emotional intelligence or something like that. So here's one right here. Okay, we talked about the percentage of the group's collective intelligence. So I'm going to just copy and paste the part that I highlighted. I'm going to scroll back down here to my T-chart, and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to put it in quote marks. And I can leave it highlighted if I want, that way I know that it's evidence. And then, because it's evidence, I'm going to put in my citation, because if you're writing in a paragraph, when you have evidence from an article, you definitely need to give credit to the author. So our author right here is Ellen Harding, and the page number that I found this on was the first page. So I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to type in her name and the page number. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do at least 3 of these. I need to get rid of my highlighting. So the next thing that I think is it's already happening in other countries. So this is another argument for why women should participate in military combat. So I'm going to say already happening in other countries. And then I'm going to go find a piece of evidence. So there's this whole section here about it's happening in Australia. And I don't want to take this part where it's listing the countries. That's not super good evidence. But I might take the first part of this sentence. Women already serve combat specialties. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it down here. Okay, so I've got that. I'm going to put my author's name, and then I'm going to figure out what page I'm on here. So this is page 1, page 2. And then I'm going to talk about how the Israeli commanders reported women exerting superior skills. So I'm going to use this piece as well for why women in other countries is working. And that's also on the page 2, so I'm going to add that right underneath. So 2, and then here's my second one. So you want to find 1 to 2 pieces of evidence for each point that you're making. So I'm going to do one final reason for why it's yes. And I'm going to say it maintains equality for all. Okay, it allows women to have that same experience. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this quote right here, the very first one, where it's a step towards equality. So that's on page 1. Oops, that didn't copy. Let me go back and do that. Come on. There we go. Okay, so there's one piece of evidence for that. It really lets women have that opportunity. Okay, and then I'm going to find another piece because I like this idea that it's expanding their opportunities. And I think there was a quote up here on, I think it's in page 2 still. Oh, here, nope. Where did it go? Oh, I'm going to use this part where it talks about how 52% of the women pass the test. So it does prove that they are being treated equally, okay, because they're being required to take the same test. So I'm going to paste that down here. And that was on the first page as well. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look and see, was there anything for no? One big reason for no, and I think that was the only couple things that we highlighted was, let's see, it would destroy effectiveness. Oh, the physical requirements was a big physical. Here it is again, the physical. So I'm going to put that together in a point. So one of the biggest reasons for no was safety concerns over physical capabilities. And then I'm going to find me a quote that would support this. So any of these green quotes would work. So I think I'm going to use this one because I think this is a very strong piece of evidence to use. So I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to paste it over here for our no. And then again, I'm going to put my citation. So that was on page 2. And that would be the end of how you would annotate and create your T-charts for a PBA practice.